She had no home. She had no help. She had no hope. But she showed up. She took the job. She stepped into the unknown. The attic was locked. The rules were cruel. The danger was real. Still she stayed. Still she fought. Still she rose. Because strength is quiet. Because courage is messy. Because survival is a choice. This is not just a story. It is a reminder. You can start again. Even from nowhere. Welcome to Book Verse. Today we are talking about the book The Housemaid, written by Freida McFadden. This is not just a thriller. It is a story of survival, of secrets, of second chances. Millie Calloway is desperate. She has no job, no home, no options. She takes a live-in job with the Winchester family. She hopes it will save her. She hopes it will be safe. But the attic room locks from the outside. Nina Winchester is not stable. Andrew Winchester is not what he seems. And their daughter Cecilia is always watching. Millie tries to stay quiet. She tries to follow the rules. She tries to keep her past hidden. But the house has its own secrets. And one of them is deadly. This book will take you inside that house. Inside Millie's mind. And inside the truth no one wants to face. We are covering this entire book section by section. Every twist, every reveal, every moment that will leave you breathless. So stay with us. Subscribe to Book Verse. And let the story begin. Section 1. The Interview. Millie Calloway is 27. She is broke. She is hungry. She is sleeping in her car. Her clothes are wrinkled. Her shoes are worn out. Her hair is not brushed. She has no job. She has no home. She has no one to call. She sees the ad. It is for a live-in maid. The Winchester family needs help. Millie applies. She has no other choice. She drives to the house. It is big. It is clean. It is quiet. The grass is perfect. The windows shine. The door is tall and white. Millie knocks. She waits. She hears footsteps. Nina Winchester opens the door. She is beautiful. She is thin. She is dressed in white. Her smile is wide. But her eyes are cold. Millie steps inside. The house smells like flowers. The floor is spotless. The walls are bright. Millie feels nervous. She tries to smile. She tries to look calm. Nina walks ahead. Millie follows. They sit in the living room. Nina asks questions. Millie answers. She lies about her past. She says she worked in hotels. She says she is good at cleaning. She says she is quiet and polite. Nina nods. She looks at Millie's clothes. She looks at her shoes. She looks at her hands. Millie feels judged. She feels small. She feels exposed. Nina stands up. She says, "Let me show you the room." Millie follows her upstairs. The hallway is long. The walls are white. The carpet is soft. Nina opens a door. "This is your room," she says. Millie steps inside. The room is small. There is a bed. There is a dresser. There is a tiny window. Millie looks around. She sees the lock. It is on the outside of the door. She stares at it. She does not ask. She does not speak. Nina smiles again. She says, "You will be safe here." Millie nods. They walk back downstairs. Nina offers her tea. Millie says yes. They sit again. Nina talks about her daughter. Her name is Cecilia. She is 9 years old. She is quiet, Nina says. She is sensitive. She needs structure. Millie listens. She nods. She tries to look interested. Nina talks about her husband. His name is Andrew. He works in finance. He is busy. He is kind. Millie smiles. She feels hopeful. She feels lucky. Nina stands up again. She says, "You can start tomorrow." Millie says thank you. She walks to her car. She sits in the driver's seat. She exhales. She looks at the house. She looks at the windows. She looks at the attic. She does not know what is coming. She does not know what is hidden. She does not know what she just stepped into. But she needs this job. She needs this room. She needs this chance. She drives away. She will return tomorrow. She will move in. She will clean the floors. She will cook the meals. She will follow the rules. She will sleep in the attic. She will lock the door. She will try to survive. Because Millie has secrets. And so does the house. And one of them is deadly. Section 2. The first warning. Millie arrives early. She parks her car. She walks to the door. The house is quiet. The air feels cold. The sky is gray. She knocks once. Nina opens the door. She smiles too wide. "Come in," she says. Millie steps inside. She carries her bag. Nina points to the kitchen. "You can start there," she says. Millie nods and walks in. The counters are spotless. The sink is dry. The fridge is full. Millie starts cleaning. She wipes the counters. She scrubs the stove. She works fast. She wants to impress. She wants to stay. Nina watches her. She stands in the doorway. She does not blink. Millie feels nervous. She keeps her head down. She keeps her hands moving. Nina walks away. Millie exhales. She keeps cleaning. Later, Millie steps outside. She wants fresh air. She wants a break. The garden is huge. The grass is perfect. The trees are trimmed. She sees a man. He is tall. He is quiet. He trims the bushes. He does not smile. He does not wave. Millie walks over. She says hello. He nods once. His name is Enzo. He is the landscaper. He works alone. Millie asks about the house. Enzo looks away. He says, "Be careful." Millie frowns. She asks why. Enzo does not answer. He picks up his tools. He walks to the shed. He does not look back. Millie stands still. She feels uneasy. She feels watched. She walks back inside. She finds Nina in the hallway. Nina is staring at the wall. Millie says, "I met Enzo." Nina turns slowly. She says, "Do not talk to him." Millie nods. She walks to the living room. She starts dusting the shelves. The books are perfect. The frames are straight. The air smells like lemon. Cecilia walks in. She is quiet. She is pale. She holds a doll. She does not speak. She stares at Millie. Millie smiles. She says hello. Cecilia says nothing. She walks to the couch. She sits down. She watches Millie clean. Millie feels strange. She feels judged. She feels small. Nina walks in. She says, "Cecilia needs space." Millie nods and leaves the room. She walks upstairs. She checks her room. The attic door is still locked. She touches the handle. It is cold. It is firm. She looks at the lock. It is thick. It is outside the door. She feels trapped. She feels unsure. She feels alone. She walks to the bathroom. She cleans the sink. She wipes the mirror. She sees her face. She looks tired. She looks older. She hears footsteps. She turns quickly. No one is there. She walks back downstairs. She finds Nina in the kitchen. Nina is cutting fruit. Her hands move fast. Her eyes are blank. Her smile is gone. Millie says, "Do you need help?" Nina says, "No." She keeps cutting. Millie watches her. She feels tense. She feels confused. Nina says, "Do not go outside." Millie nods. She does not ask why. She walks to the laundry room. She starts folding towels. She hears a door slam. She jumps. She drops a towel. She listens. The house is silent. She walks to the hallway. She sees Cecilia. Cecilia is drawing. She uses red crayon. She presses hard. Millie asks, "What are you drawing?" Cecilia says, "A monster." Millie laughs nervously. Cecilia says, "It lives upstairs." Millie freezes. She says nothing. Cecilia walks away. Millie stands still. She feels cold. She walks to the attic. She touches the door. She hears breathing. She steps back. She walks away. She goes to her room. She sits on the bed. She looks at the ceiling. She thinks about Enzo. His words echo. "Be careful." She wonders what he meant. She thinks about Nina. Her smile is fake. Her eyes are sharp. She thinks about Cecilia. She is quiet. She is strange. She thinks about the attic. It is locked. It is dark. She feels trapped. She feels watched. She feels afraid. But she needs this job. She needs this roof. She needs this chance. She will stay. She will clean. She will obey. Even if the house is hiding something. Even if the family is not what they seem. Even if danger is close. Because Millie has nowhere else to go. And the warning has already come. Section 3. Locked in. Millie wakes early. The house is quiet. The sun is soft. She walks to the kitchen. She makes coffee. She starts her day. She wipes the counters. She folds the towels. She checks the laundry. Nina is not around. Cecilia is still asleep. Andrew is at work. Millie feels calm. She feels useful. She feels safe. She walks upstairs. She wants to clean her room. She wants to organize her things. She reaches the attic door. She touches the handle. It is cold. She looks at the lock. It is thick. It is outside the door. She stares at it. She feels strange. She feels watched. She opens the door. She steps inside. She looks around. The room is small. The walls are plain. The window is tiny. She sees the bed. She sees the dresser. She sees the floor. Then she sees the marks. They are on the inside of the door. They are deep. She steps closer. She runs her hand over them. They feel rough. They look like scratches. They look like someone tried to escape. They look fresh. Millie steps back. She feels cold. She feels sick. She sits on the bed. She stares at the door. She thinks about the lock. Why is it outside? Why are there marks? Why did no one mention this? She remembers Cecilia's words. The monster lives upstairs. She hears them again. She thinks about Enzo. "Be careful," he said. She did not listen. She thinks about Nina. Her smile was fake. Her eyes were sharp. She thinks about Andrew. He was kind. Too kind. She stands up. She walks to the window. She looks outside. The garden is empty. The shed is closed. The trees are still. She feels trapped. She feels alone. She feels afraid. She walks to the door. She opens it slowly. She steps into the hallway. She hears footsteps. She turns quickly. No one is there. She walks downstairs. She finds Nina in the kitchen. She is cutting fruit. Millie says, "The attic door has a lock." Nina does not look up. She says, "It is for safety." Millie asks, "Why is it outside?" Nina says, "You ask too many questions." Millie stays quiet. She walks to the living room. She starts dusting. She tries to focus. Cecilia walks in. She sits on the couch. She watches Millie. Millie says, "Do you like this house?" Cecilia says, "It is not safe." Millie freezes. She says, "Why?" Cecilia says, "The attic is bad." She hugs her doll. Millie feels uneasy. She feels tense. She feels confused. She walks to the hallway. She sees Andrew. He is smiling. He says, "You are doing great." Millie nods. She tries to smile. He says, "Let me show you something." She follows him. They walk to the basement. He opens the door. It is dark. It smells like dust. He says, "We keep old things here." Millie steps inside. She sees boxes. She sees old clothes. She sees broken toys. She sees a mirror. Andrew says, "This house has history." Millie nods. She feels nervous. He says, "Some things are better left alone." She does not reply. She walks back upstairs. She goes to her room. She sits on the bed. She thinks about the attic. She thinks about the scratches. She thinks about the lock. She thinks about the warning. She feels trapped. She feels watched. She feels unsafe. She wants to leave. She wants to run. She wants to scream. But she cannot. She has no money. She has no home. She needs this job. She needs this roof. She needs this chance. She lies down. She stares at the ceiling. She listens to the silence. She hears a creak. She hears a whisper. She hears a door close. She sits up. She walks to the hallway. She sees Nina. She is standing still. She is staring at the wall. She is not blinking. Millie says, "Are you okay?" Nina says, "Do not go upstairs." Millie nods. She walks away. She goes to the kitchen. She washes her hands. She looks at the window. She sees Enzo. He is trimming the bushes. She walks outside. She says, "Can I ask something?" Enzo says, "You should leave." Millie says, "Why?" Enzo says, "You will find out." He walks away. Millie stands still. She feels cold. She feels scared. She walks back inside. She goes to the attic. She touches the door. She sees the lock. She sees the marks. She sees the truth. She is not safe. She is not welcome. She is not free. She is locked in. And the house is watching. Section 4. The Family Dynamic. Millie wakes up early. She hears birds outside. She hears footsteps below. She gets dressed. She walks downstairs. She enters the kitchen. Nina is already there. She is slicing fruit. She is not smiling. Her hands move fast. Her eyes look tired. Her mood feels sharp. Millie says, "Good morning." Nina says nothing. She keeps cutting. Millie starts cleaning. She wipes the counters. She loads the dishwasher. Nina drops a knife. She curses under her breath. She slams the drawer. Millie stays quiet. She does not ask. She does not react. Nina turns suddenly. She says, "Do not touch my knives." Millie nods. She steps back. The mood shifts fast. One moment is calm. The next is tense. Nina walks out. Millie exhales slowly. She feels confused. She walks to the living room. She starts dusting the shelves. She hears soft footsteps. Andrew walks in. He is smiling. He is holding coffee. He says, "You are doing great." Millie nods. She tries to smile. He says, "Nina is just tired." Millie says, "I understand." Andrew says, "She gets overwhelmed." He sits on the couch. He asks about Millie's past. She gives short answers. He listens closely. He nods often. He seems kind. Millie feels safe. She feels seen. She feels heard. Andrew says, "You are helping us." Millie says, "Thank you." He says, "We are lucky to have you." Millie walks to the hallway. She sees Cecilia. She is sitting on the floor. She is drawing again. She uses red crayon. She presses hard. Millie kneels beside her. She says, "What are you making?" Cecilia says, "A fire." Millie frowns. She says, "Why a fire?" Cecilia says, "It burns everything." Millie stays quiet. She watches her draw. She feels uneasy. Cecilia stands up. She walks away. She does not say goodbye. Millie walks to the dining room. She starts polishing the table. She hears Nina yelling. She walks to the kitchen. Nina is shouting at Cecilia. Her voice is loud. She says, "You are not listening." She says, "You are not normal." Cecilia cries. Millie steps back. She does not interfere. She does not speak. Andrew walks in. He says, "Enough." Nina storms out. Cecilia runs upstairs. Andrew sighs. He looks tired. He says, "She is struggling." Millie nods. She says nothing. Andrew says, "Cecilia needs patience." Millie says, "I will try." He says, "Thank you." Millie walks to her room. She sits on the bed. She thinks about the family. Nina is unpredictable. Andrew is calm. Cecilia is silent. The house feels tense. The air feels heavy. The walls feel close. Millie wants to help. She wants to stay. She wants to understand. She walks to the hallway. She sees Nina again. She is staring at the mirror. Millie says, "Are you okay?" Nina says, "Do not speak." Millie nods. Nina says, "You are too close." Millie steps back. She walks away. She goes to the laundry room. She folds towels. She hears footsteps. Andrew walks in. He says, "You are doing great." Millie smiles. He says, "Nina is not herself." Millie says, "I noticed." He says, "She was not always like this." He talks about the past. He says Nina used to laugh. He says she used to sing. Millie listens. She feels sympathy. She feels unsure. Andrew says, "Things changed." He does not explain. He walks away. Millie walks to the garden. She sees Cecilia again. She is sitting alone. Millie says, "Do you want company?" Cecilia shrugs. She says, "I like quiet." Millie sits beside her. They watch the trees. They say nothing. Cecilia says, "Mom is sad." Millie says, "I know." Cecilia says, "Dad is fake." Millie looks at her. She says, "Why fake?" Cecilia says, "He lies." Millie stays silent. She feels confused. She feels curious. Cecilia stands up. She walks inside. Millie stays in the garden. She thinks about Nina. She is sharp. She is cold. She thinks about Andrew. He is warm. He is smooth. She thinks about Cecilia. She is quiet. She is watching. The family is broken. The house is tense. The truth is hidden. Millie walks back inside. She goes to the attic. She touches the door. She sees the lock. She sees the marks. She feels trapped. She lies on the bed. She stares at the ceiling. She listens to the silence. She hears voices. She hears footsteps. She hears crying. She closes her eyes. She breathes slowly. She tries to rest. But the house is loud. The family is louder. And the danger is growing. Section 5. Secrets in the medicine cabinet. Millie wakes up early. The house is quiet. The sky is still dark. She walks to the bathroom. She wants to wash her face. She wants to start fresh. She opens the cabinet. She sees bottles. She sees boxes. She sees pills. She sees labels. She sees warnings. She picks up one bottle. It is for anxiety. It is prescribed to Nina. She picks up another. It is for sleep. It is also Nina's. She sees a third bottle. It is for mood swings. It has strong side effects. Millie stares at the bottles. She feels uneasy. She feels curious. She puts them back. She closes the cabinet. She washes her face. She walks to the kitchen. She starts making coffee. She hears footsteps. Nina walks in. She looks tired. She looks pale. Her hands shake slightly. Her eyes look distant. Her voice is low. She says, "Did you sleep well?" Millie says, "Yes, thank you." Nina nods slowly. She sits at the table. She stares at the wall. She does not speak. Millie places coffee in front of her. Nina does not touch it. She just sits still. Millie starts cleaning. She wipes the counters. She loads the dishwasher. Nina suddenly stands up. She walks to the window. She whispers something. Millie cannot hear. She steps closer. She says, "Are you okay?" Nina says, "I am fine." Her voice is sharp. Her eyes are cold. Millie steps back. She walks to the hallway. She sees Andrew. He is dressed for work. He is holding his phone. He is smiling. He says, "Good morning." Millie nods. She tries to smile. He says, "Nina has good days." Millie says, "I understand." He says, "Today is not one." Millie nods again. She walks to the living room. She starts dusting. She hears Cecilia upstairs. She hears her singing. She hears her laughing. Millie walks up. She peeks into Cecilia's room. She sees drawings on the wall. One shows a woman crying. One shows a house on fire. One shows a locked door. Millie says, "These are strong pictures." Cecilia says, "They are real." Millie says, "What do you mean?" Cecilia says, "Mom cries a lot." She says, "Dad lies a lot." She says, "The attic is bad." Millie feels cold. She feels tense. She feels afraid. She walks back downstairs. She finds Nina in the kitchen. She is staring at the sink. Millie says, "Can I help you?" Nina says, "Do not touch anything." Millie nods. She walks to the laundry room. She folds towels. She hears a door slam. She walks to the hallway. She sees Andrew. He looks calm. He says, "Nina had a breakdown." Millie says, "I saw the pills." Andrew nods. He says, "She was in treatment." He says, "It helped for a while." He says, "Then things got worse." Millie listens. She stays quiet. She feels unsure. Andrew says, "There was an accident." Millie says, "What kind?" Andrew says, "A drowning." Millie freezes. She says, "Who drowned?" Andrew says, "A friend." He says, "It happened years ago." He says, "Nina was there." He says, "She blamed herself." Millie feels sick. She feels confused. She feels trapped. Andrew says, "She changed after that." He says, "She stopped smiling." He says, "She stopped sleeping." Millie says, "Is Cecilia okay?" Andrew says, "She is strong." He says, "She sees everything." Millie nods. She walks to the attic. She touches the door. She sees the lock. She sees the marks. She feels the fear. She opens the door. She steps inside. She sits on the bed. She thinks about the pills. She thinks about the drowning. She thinks about the silence. She hears footsteps. She hears whispering. She hears crying. She walks to the hallway. She sees Nina. She is holding a photo. Millie says, "Is that your friend?" Nina nods. She says, "Her name was Lily." She says, "We were close." She says, "She trusted me." She says, "I failed her." Millie says, "It was not your fault." Nina says, "It feels like it was." She walks away. Millie stands still. She feels the weight. She feels the pain. She walks to the kitchen. She makes tea. She brings it to Nina. Nina takes it slowly. She says, "Thank you." Her voice is soft. Millie says, "You are not alone." Nina nods. She looks down. Millie walks to her room. She sits on the bed. She thinks about everything. The pills. The drowning. The locked attic. She feels trapped. She feels watched. She feels scared. But she also feels something else. She feels needed. She feels strong. She will stay. She will listen. She will survive. Because the house has secrets. And Millie is starting to see them. Section 6. Crossing the line. The house feels quiet. Too quiet. Like something is waiting. Millie walks into the kitchen. Andrew is already there. He is making coffee. He smiles. He says, "You are up early." She nods and pours herself a cup. They sit at the table. The silence feels warm. Not tense. Not sharp. Andrew asks about her night. She says it was fine. She does not mention the dreams. He talks about work. He talks about stress. He talks about Nina. She is not herself, he says. She used to be different. Millie listens. She hears pain in his voice. She hears regret. She hears something else. He looks tired. He looks worn down. He looks honest. Millie feels close to him. Closer than before. Closer than she should. Later, she walks into the living room. Andrew is there again. He is reading. She sits nearby. They talk about books. They talk about music. He laughs. She laughs too. It feels easy. Nina walks in. She sees them together. Her face tightens. She says nothing. She walks out. The tension returns. Millie feels guilty. She feels confused. She feels drawn in. That night, she hears a knock. It is soft. It is slow. She opens the attic door. Andrew is standing there. He says, "Can we talk?" She lets him in. He sits on the bed. He looks nervous. "I feel alone," he says. "I feel lost." Millie listens. He talks about Nina. He talks about the fights. He talks about the silence. Millie says, "You deserve peace." He says, "You make me feel calm." She says nothing. He reaches for her hand. She does not pull away. She feels warmth. They sit in silence. Then he leans in. She does not stop him. They kiss. It is soft. It is slow. They sleep together. It happens quietly. Happens quickly. Millie feels everything. Fear. Hope. Guilt. She wakes before him. She watches him sleep. She feels exposed. She walks to the window. The sun is rising. The house is still. She hears footsteps. She hears shouting. She hears Nina. Millie rushes downstairs. Nina is screaming. Andrew is calm. "You lied to me," Nina says. "You betrayed me." Andrew says, "We are done." Millie stands in the hallway. She does not speak. She does not move. Nina sees her. Her eyes are wild. Her voice shakes. "You think you are better," she says. "You think you are safe?" Millie stays silent. Andrew says, "You need to leave." Nina laughs. She says, "This is my house." He says, "Not anymore." She throws a vase. It shatters. Cecilia walks in. She sees the mess. She sees the rage. She runs upstairs. Millie follows her. She finds her crying. Cecilia says, "Why is Mom leaving?" Millie says, "It is complicated." Cecilia says, "I hate this house." Millie hugs her. She feels the weight. She feels the damage. Downstairs, Nina packs her things. She slams drawers. She curses under her breath. Andrew watches quietly. He does not help. He does not stop her. Millie stands nearby. She feels torn. She feels responsible. Nina walks to the door. She turns one last time. She says, "You will regret this." Then she is gone. The door closes. The silence returns. Andrew sits on the couch. He looks tired. He looks broken. Millie sits beside him. She says, "Are you okay?" He says, I do not know. They sit together. No words. Just quiet. That night, Millie lies awake. She thinks about the kiss. She thinks about the fight. She thinks about Nina. She thinks about Cecilia. She thinks about herself. The attic feels colder. The walls feel tighter. The silence feels louder. She hears a creak. She hears a whisper. She hears a door close. She gets up. She walks to the hallway. She sees Cecilia. She is drawing again. She uses black crayon. She presses hard. Millie says, "What are you making?" Cecilia says, "A cage." Millie says, "Why a cage?" Cecilia says, "Because no one is free." Millie feels a chill. She says nothing. She walks back to her room. She sits on the bed. She stares at the door. The lock is still there. The scratches are still there. The fear is still there. She thinks about Andrew. She thinks about trust. She thinks about danger. She wonders what comes next. She wonders what is real. She wonders what is hidden. Because Nina is gone. But the house is not safe. And the story is far from over. Section 7. The trap closes. The house feels different. Nina is gone. The silence is heavy. Millie walks through the hallway. She sees Andrew in the kitchen. He is calm. He is smiling. He says, "Things will be better now." She nods. She wants to believe him. The days feel quiet. The cleaning feels easy. The rules feel relaxed. Andrew talks more. He shares stories. He shares jokes. Millie listens. She laughs sometimes. She feels close. Cecilia stays quiet. She draws in her room. She watches everything. Millie walks into the attic. She opens the door. She steps inside. The lock is still there. The scratches are still there. The fear is still there. She lies on the bed. She stares at the ceiling. She hears footsteps. Andrew knocks. She opens the door. He steps in. He says, "You make this house better." She smiles. She says, "Thank you." He sits beside her. He touches her hand. She does not pull away. They talk for hours. They talk about dreams. They talk about pain. He says, "You are strong." She says, "I try to be." He says, "You are more than that." They kiss again. It feels soft. It feels safe. That night, Millie sleeps deeply. She feels warm. She feels wanted. But something changes. She wakes up suddenly. The door is locked. She tries to open it. It does not move. She pulls harder. Nothing happens. She knocks. She shouts. No one answers. She looks around. She sees the scratches again. She feels panic. She feels trapped. She feels betrayed. She waits for hours. She sits on the bed. She listens to the silence. Finally, the door opens. Andrew stands there. He looks calm. He says, "You were safe." She says, "Why did you lock it?" He says, "You needed rest." Millie steps back. She feels cold. She feels confused. Andrew smiles. He says, "You are mine now." She does not respond. She walks past him. She goes to the bathroom. She locks the door. She stares at the mirror. She sees her face. She sees fear. She opens the cabinet. She sees the pills. She sees the truth. She walks to the kitchen. She finds Cecilia. She is drawing again. Millie says, "Are you okay?" Cecilia says, "He locked you in." Millie nods. She says, "I know." Cecilia says, "He did that to Mom." Millie freezes. She says, "What do you mean?" Cecilia says, "He locked her up." She says, "He hurt her." She says, "She cried every night." Millie feels sick. She feels angry. She feels scared. She walks to the garden. She sees Enzo. He is trimming the bushes. She says, "Did you know?" Enzo says, "I warned you." She says, "He locked me in." Enzo says, "He is dangerous." She says, "Why does no one stop him?" Enzo says, "He hides well." Millie walks back inside. She finds Andrew in the living room. He is reading. She says, "We need to talk." He says, "About what?" She says, "About the attic." Andrew stands slowly. He says, "You are overthinking." She says, "You locked me in." He steps closer. He says, "You belong here." She steps back. He says, "You have no one else." She says, "That does not mean control." He laughs softly. He says, "You will see." She walks away. She goes to her room. She locks the door. She sits on the bed. She feels the walls closing in. She thinks about Nina. She thinks about Cecilia. She thinks about herself. The trap is closing. The truth is clear. She is not safe. She hears footsteps. She hears whispers. She hears the attic door creak. She gets up. She walks to the hallway. She sees Andrew. He is standing by the attic. He is holding the key. He is smiling. She says, "Why are you doing this?" He says, "Because I can." She says, "You hurt people." He says, "They always come back." She says, "Not this time." He laughs again. Millie walks away. She goes to the kitchen. She finds Cecilia. She says, "We need to leave." Cecilia says, "He will not let us." Millie says, "We will find a way." She walks to the garden. She finds Enzo. She says, "Help me." Enzo nods. He says, "I will try." She says, "Thank you." Millie goes back inside. She packs a small bag. She hides it under the bed. She writes a note. She hides it in Cecilia's book. She says, "Read this later." Cecilia nods. She hugs Millie. She says, "Be careful." Millie walks to the attic. She opens the door. She steps inside. She stares at the lock. She stares at the marks. She stares at the truth. She knows now. This is not love. This is control. This is not safety. This is a trap. And it is closing fast. Section 8. Nina's story. The house is quiet. The air feels heavy. Millie walks slowly. She finds a letter. It is under her pillow. It is written by Nina. The paper is soft. The ink is faded. The words are sharp. Millie reads each line. She learns the truth. She learns Nina's story. Years ago, Nina met Andrew. He was charming. He was kind. He was perfect. They fell in love. They moved fast. They got married. At first, life felt good. Andrew gave her gifts. He gave her praise. He gave her attention. But things changed. Slowly. Quietly. He started controlling her. He chose her clothes. He chose her friends. He chose her words. Nina felt trapped. She felt confused. She felt alone. Andrew said, "I know best." He said, "You need me." He said, "You are lucky." She believed him. She stopped fighting. She stopped asking. Then came the attic. He said it was for rest. He said it was for healing. He locked the door. He kept the key. He watched her cry. She scratched the walls. She screamed at night. She begged to leave. Andrew smiled. He said, "You are sick." He said, "This is love." Nina broke slowly. Her mind faded. Her voice disappeared. She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She stopped hoping. One day, she escaped. She ran to the garden. She found Enzo. He helped her. He gave her water. He gave her silence. She hid in the shed. She cried for hours. She wrote her story. Millie reads every word. She feels the pain. She feels the fear. Nina was not crazy. She was not weak. She was not wrong. Andrew made her this way. He broke her slowly. He smiled while doing it. Millie walks to the attic. She touches the door. She sees the scratches. She remembers the night. She remembers the lock. She remembers the silence. Now she understands. Now she sees clearly. Now she knows the truth. Andrew is not kind. He is not safe. He is not loving. He is dangerous. He is cruel. He is calculated. Millie walks to the garden. She finds Enzo. She shows him the letter. He reads it slowly. He nods once. He says, "I knew." Millie says, "Why did no one help?" Enzo says, "He hides well." He says, "People believe him." Millie says, "Not anymore." She walks back inside. She finds Cecilia. She says, "Your mom was strong." Cecilia says, "I miss her." Millie hugs her. She says, "We will fix this." Cecilia nods. She says, "He scares me." Millie walks to the kitchen. She finds Andrew. He is smiling again. He says, "You look tired." She says, "I read Nina's letter." His smile fades. He says, "She was unstable." She says, "She was abused." He says, "You do not understand." Millie steps closer. She says, "I understand everything." He says, "You are making a mistake." She says, "No, you did." She walks away. She goes to her room. She locks the door. She sits on the bed. She breathes slowly. She thinks about Nina. She thinks about the attic. She thinks about the pain. This is not just a house. It is a trap. It is a prison. Millie opens her drawer. She finds the note. She finds the plan. Nina left instructions. She wrote everything. She warned Millie. She said, "He will charm you." She said, "He will trap you." She said, "You must fight." Millie reads it again. She feels stronger. She feels ready. She walks to the hallway. She sees Andrew. He is watching her. She says, "I am leaving." He says, "You will regret it." She says, "I already do." He steps closer. She does not move. She does not blink. He says, "You are mine." She says, "Not anymore." She walks past him. She goes to the garden. She finds Enzo. She says, "It is time." He nods. He opens the gate. She steps outside. She looks back once. She sees the attic window. She sees the scratches. She sees the truth. She sees Nina. She sees herself. This is not the end. This is the start. This is freedom. Because Nina's story matters. Because Millie listened. Because silence is not safety. Section 9. The Setup. Millie sits in her room. She reads Nina's letter again. Each word feels heavier now. This was not random. This was not luck. This was planned. Nina chose her. Nina watched her. Nina waited for her. Millie was not hired to clean. She was hired to survive. She was hired to fight. The attic was not just a room. It was a test. It was a trap. Nina knew Andrew's pattern. She knew how he worked. She knew what he wanted. He needed control. He needed silence. He needed someone to break. Millie was different. She had a record. She had a past. She had been in jail. She had fought before. She had survived before. Nina saw that. She saw strength. She saw fire. Millie was bait. She was the plan. She was the answer. Nina hoped Millie would fight back. She hoped Millie would see the truth. She hoped Millie would finish what she started. Millie walks to the attic. She touches the door. She feels the scratches. She remembers the night. She remembers the lock. She remembers the silence. Now she knows why. Now she sees clearly. Now she understands everything. Andrew is not just cruel. He is calculated. He is practiced. He did this to Nina. He tried to do it to Millie. He will do it again. Unless someone stops him. Unless someone fights. Unless someone wins. Millie walks to the kitchen. She finds Cecilia. She says, "Your mom chose me." Cecilia says, "I know." She says, "She told me." She says, "She believed in you." Millie feels the weight. She feels the pressure. She feels the purpose. She walks outside. She finds Enzo. She says, "It was all planned." Enzo nods. He says, "She was smart." He says, "She was brave." Millie says, "Now it is my turn." She walks back inside. She finds Andrew. He is sitting on the couch. He is reading again. He looks calm. She says, "We need to talk." He says, "About what?" She says, "About Nina." He closes the book. He says, "She was unstable." She says, "She was stronger than you think." He stands up. He says, "You are starting to sound like her." She says, "Maybe that is a good thing." He steps closer. She does not move. She does not blink. He says, "You are mine now." She says, "Not anymore." She walks away. She goes to her room. She locks the door. She breathes slowly. She thinks about the setup. She thinks about the plan. She thinks about the risk. Nina trusted her. Cecilia trusts her. Now she must act. She writes everything down. She writes what happened. She writes what she saw. She hides the paper. She hides it in Cecilia's book. She says, "Keep this safe." Cecilia nods. She hugs Millie. She says, "Be careful." Millie walks to the attic. She opens the door. She steps inside. She stares at the walls. She stares at the marks. She stares at the truth. This was never just a job. This was never just a house. This was a setup. And now, it is her move. Section 10. Millie's Past. Millie sits alone. The house is quiet. The walls feel close. She thinks about her life. She thinks about her past. She thinks about the truth. Before this job, she had nothing. No home. No family. No peace. She had a record. She had a history. She had scars. Millie was arrested once. She was young. She was angry. She fought someone. She did not hold back. She did not run. The court gave her time. She served her sentence. She kept her head down. Inside, she learned fast. She learned silence. She learned control. She saw pain. She saw fear. She saw power. Millie did not break. She did not fold. She did not quit. She came out stronger. She came out sharper. She came out quiet. But the world did not forget. Her record followed her. Her name was marked. Jobs said no. Shelters said no. People said no. She slept in her car. She ate once a day. She cried in silence. Then she saw the ad. The Winchester family needed help. She applied. She did not know the truth. She did not know the setup. She did not know the plan. But Nina knew. Nina saw her file. Nina saw her strength. Millie was not soft. She was not fragile. She was not easy. She had fought before. She had survived before. She had nothing to lose. That made her perfect. That made her dangerous. That made her ready. Nina needed someone like her. Someone who could fight back. Someone who could finish it. Millie walks to the mirror. She sees her face. She sees her past. She does not hide. She does not flinch. She does not lie. Her record is real. Her pain is real. Her strength is earned. Andrew does not know everything. He thinks she is weak. He thinks she is scared. But Millie is watching. Millie is waiting. Millie is planning. She walks to the attic. She opens the door. She steps inside. She sees the marks. She sees the lock. She sees the truth. This is not new to her. This is not strange. This is familiar. She knows control. She knows fear. She knows how to fight. Millie sits on the bed. She remembers the cell. She remembers the cold. She remembers the silence. She remembers the screams. She remembers the choice. To give up, or to stand up. She chose to stand. Now she must do it again. Now she must finish this. Now she must protect Cecilia. Millie walks to the hallway. She sees Andrew. He is smiling again. He says, "You look tired." She says, "I am thinking." He says, "You should rest." She says, "I have rested enough." He steps closer. She does not move. He says, "You are mine." She says, "I am no one's." He laughs softly. Millie walks away. She goes to the garden. She finds Enzo. She says, "I have a record." He says, "I know." She says, "I am not ashamed." Enzo nods. He says, "You are strong." She says, "I need your help." He says, "I am ready." She walks back inside. She finds Cecilia. She says, "I have made mistakes." Cecilia says, "So did Mom." Millie says, "We will fix this." Cecilia hugs her. She says, "I believe you." Millie feels the weight. She feels the pressure. She feels the fire. She feels the fight. Her past is not clean. Her past is not easy. Her past is not quiet. But it made her ready. It made her sharp. It made her perfect. Millie walks to her room. She locks the door. She sits on the bed. She writes everything down. She writes her story. She writes her plan. She hides the paper. She hides it well. She hides it for Cecilia. Millie knows what comes next. She knows the risk. She knows the cost. But she is not afraid. She is not weak. She is not done. Because her past is power. And now, it is time to use it. Section 11. The Confrontation. Millie stands in the hallway. Her hands are shaking. Her heart is loud. She knows what must happen. She knows what is coming. She knows it is time. Andrew is in the living room. He is calm. He is reading again. Millie walks in slowly. She says, "We need to talk." He looks up. He says, "About what?" She says, "About everything." He smiles. He says, "You are tired." She says, "I am done." His smile fades. Millie steps closer. She says, "I know the truth." He says, "Truth is tricky." She says, "You locked Nina in." She says, "You locked me in." She says, "You hurt us both." Andrew stands up. He says, "You are confused." She says, "No, I am clear." He walks toward her. She does not move. She does not blink. He says, "You have no proof." She says, "I have her letter." He freezes. She says, "I have her story." She says, "I have my own." He steps back. He says, "You will ruin everything." She says, "You already did." He laughs once. He says, "You think you are strong?" She says, "I know I am." He says, "You are just like her." Millie nods. She says, "That is the point." He says, "You will regret this." She says, "You should be afraid." He grabs her arm. She pulls away. He says, "You are mine." She says, "Not anymore." She walks out. She goes to the attic. She opens the door. She steps inside. She sees the marks. She sees the lock. She sees the truth. She waits. She breathes. She listens. Andrew follows her. He stands in the doorway. He says, "You belong here." She says, "So do you." She steps aside. He walks in. She turns quickly. She slams the door. She locks it. He shouts. He bangs the door. He curses her name. Millie stands still. She does not flinch. She does not cry. She says, "This is justice." She says, "This is truth." She says, "This is your turn." Cecilia walks up. She sees the door. She hears the shouting. She says, "Is he locked in?" Millie nods. She says, "He cannot hurt us now." Cecilia hugs her. She says, "Thank you." Millie feels the weight lift. She walks to the garden. She finds Enzo. She says, "It is done." Enzo nods. He says, "You did what no one could." She says, "I did what I had to." They sit in silence. The air feels clean. The house feels lighter. Inside, Andrew screams. He begs. He threatens. Millie does not open the door. She does not answer. She does not care. She walks to the kitchen. She makes tea. She sits with Cecilia. They talk about Nina. They talk about healing. They talk about peace. Millie says, "Your mom was brave." Cecilia says, "So are you." Millie smiles. She says, "We are free now." Cecilia nods. She says, "I feel safe." Millie walks to her room. She writes everything down. She writes the truth. She writes about the attic. She writes about the lock. She writes about the fight. She hides the paper. She hides it well. She hides it for the future. Andrew stays locked in. The days pass slowly. The house stays quiet. Millie watches the door. She listens to the silence. She feels the shift. This is not revenge. This is not anger. This is survival. She did not choose this. She did not want this. But she faced it. She stood up. She fought back. She won. Because truth matters. Because silence breaks. Because courage speaks. Millie walks to the attic. She touches the door. She hears nothing. She says, "It is over." She walks away. She does not look back. Section 12. The epilogue. The house is quiet. The attic is locked. Andrew is inside. Millie walks through the hallway. She feels calm. She feels clear. Cecilia is drawing again. Her lines are soft. Her colors are bright. Millie says, "Are you okay?" Cecilia nods. She says, "I feel safe now." Millie smiles. She says, "You are strong." Cecilia hugs her. The days pass slowly. The house stays quiet. The tension fades. Millie packs her things. She folds her clothes. She closes her bag. She walks to the garden. She finds Enzo. She says, "I am leaving." Enzo nods. He says, "You did what no one could." She says, "It was time." They shake hands. They say goodbye. She walks away. Millie drives to the city. She finds a small hotel. She checks in. She lies on the bed. She stares at the ceiling. She breathes slowly. Her phone buzzes. It is a message. It is a job offer. She reads the details. It is for a live-in maid. The address is nearby. She replies quickly. She says, "I am interested." She gets a response. The woman says, "Come tomorrow." Millie sets her alarm. She closes her eyes. The next morning, she gets dressed. She ties her hair. She wears clean clothes. She drives to the house. It is large. It is quiet. She knocks once. The door opens slowly. A woman stands there. She is older. She is calm. She is watching. Millie says, "I am here for the job." The woman nods. She says, "Come in." The house smells like wood. The walls are dark. The air feels still. They sit in the living room. The woman pours tea. She speaks slowly. She says, I read your file. Millie stays quiet. She listens. The woman says, you were at the Winchester house. Millie nods. She says, yes. The woman says, you handled it well. Millie says, I did what I had to. The woman smiles. She says, I need help. Millie says, with cleaning. The woman says, with something else. She leans forward. Her voice drops. Her eyes sharpen. She says, I want my husband gone. Millie does not react. She waits. The woman says, he is cruel. She says, he is dangerous. She says, he will not stop. Millie says, what do you want me to do? The woman says, I want you to kill him. The room goes silent. Millie breathes slowly. She looks at the woman. She sees no fear. She sees pain. She sees rage. She sees resolve. Millie says, why me? The woman says, because you can. She says, because you already did. Millie does not answer. She thinks about Andrew. She thinks about the attic. She thinks about Nina. She thinks about Cecilia. She thinks about herself. She says, I will do it. The woman nods. She says, you start tomorrow. Millie stands up. She walks to the door. She steps outside. The air feels cold. The sky is gray. The street is quiet. She gets in her car. She drives slowly. She watches the road. Her hands are steady. Her mind is clear. Her heart is quiet. This is not a job. This is not a favor. This is a choice. Millie has changed. She is not the same. She is not afraid. She has seen the worst. She has faced the dark. She has survived the trap. Now she is the one in control. Now she is the one with power. Now she is the one who decides. The story does not end. It begins again. And Millie is ready.